Associates. They'll have to come up to the microphone and introduce themselves because I'm sorry I don't know your names. But, they've undertaken what's called facility condition study and produced some documents here on conditions of our building, usability, and things like that.
Hello, my name is Jeff Strong with Disctrict Associate Architects. I'm also here with Fred Witham. We're going to run through sort of an update of where we are with the feasibility study right now. And I think we're presenting to some of you for the first time, just as an overview. Crabtree Rorball and Associates, we've been in design for more than 35 years, really throughout the country. The majority of our work is focused in the Mid-Atlantic region, and about 80% of our work is K-12 education. Myself, I've been working in educational architecture for 20 years.
I just recently retired as a superintendent in schools after 35 years. I spent the last 6 as a superintendent of the Cumberland Valley School District. My doctoral work was in educational facilities planning. For the past decade, I've been teaching the facilities course to aspiring superintendents at Shippensburg University, through Wilkes University, and through Duquesne, primarily through SHIP on a regular basis. Prior to CV, I was in a small school district, very much like a smaller school district in terms of numbers, very much like your school district, and my son and daughter-in-law actually had wonderful educational experiences preparing to be teachers in this district. They both attended Lockheed.
So what we have up on the screen is just a short agenda tonight. We've been working with the administration for about 2 months, and I think we wanted to bring some of that information to you this evening, both where we are on schedule, where we are with enrollment analysis. That's been a large part of our discussion. We're going to talk about some of the building assessments for each of your facilities. We've been everything from the surveying to sort of evaluating exactly how we're utilizing the buildings, and then starting to develop cost estimating. And then we're going to show some preliminary option development for you this evening. I would warn, this is very early in the process, so we sort of jokingly work in progress. What we don't want to do is show up with a complete feasibility study. We've gone through the whole process, and here you go. Some of this is still in process, just like some of the discussions with budget. We're still modifying some of the numbers. Tonight, what you're going to see is we've created the order of magnitudes that we're evaluating, and now we'll begin to refine those. We also want to hear input from you as the board of directors. You can feed that information back to the administration, and we really are in that sort of back and forth in developing what's appropriate for Keystone as you move forward. So schedule, again, we've completed the enrollment analysis. We've done building surveys. Essentially, we've surveyed and photographed every single one of your facilities throughout the district. We've also worked with your administrators to really understand how the spaces are being utilized. Often schools, education, how a building's being used doesn't just change year to year, but even month to month at times. So really evaluating that with you. And then from that, we're beginning to develop facility condition index. We are going to show you some costs for each of your buildings tonight. I would note we're going to show you totals, but actually what we've been talking with the administration is some of these costs would be spread out through a 10-year period. Really, this is about putting a plan together of how you would maintain your buildings over the long term, so that you're aware of costs that may be coming 2 years or 6 years from now. In February, we'll be completing those facilities assessment. Up to now, we've really been focused on your southern elementary schools that we'll review this evening. And we're also beginning to look at option requirements and option development. And then in March, April time period, we'll really start to pull everything together, wrap up the study, incorporating all the input from administration, stakeholders, yourself. I would note a feasibility study is a requirement from the Department of Education. If you would want to move forward with any projects, that is a requirement to receive those dollars from the state. We've heard some positive news from the state. even though there's been a moratorium on school construction for the last year, as far as fund for the last 7 years of funding, that is finally moving forward. They will have new forms in place by this summer. And so we're anticipating that funding will become available either this summer or the next year. So the fact that you're putting together a study right now, you're almost at the perfect time. If you would want to move forward with any projects, you could absorb those funds that do have these requirements, and we're following each of the steps for the study. So the first thing we're going to do is Fred is going to walk through some of the enrollment analysis and discussions that we've been having.
Thank you. So as a school district, you're really experiencing the same thing that the region is indicated by your IU is experiencing. Since 2015-16, the district has lost 658 students K-12, which represents nearly 15% of its student body. The math, which is correct, whether or not it holds true in actuality, indicates that you're going to potentially lose another 848 students, or an additional 21% of the current student body in the next 5 school years. I do want to give you, again, that caveat that, yes, in fact, that math is correct, and that prediction is well based on previous trends, both by what PDE has projected as well as what we've been able to project mathematically based on your actual enrollments. You are going to have to decide as a board how it is you want to settle in on a final number of students to plan for, because you have a very unique district that is geographically quite large, that presents you with great opportunity, but also some challenges.
Fred, if I could just make a point of clarification. When you look at the executive summary, and you look at the IU10 data, I think it's important for people to know that IU10 encompasses 3 counties: Clearfield County, Center County, and Clinton County. We're the only school district that represents Clinton County. Center County has quite a few schools, and Clearfield County, but what I want to make sure we're understanding this correctly, that across that 3-county region, the trend line is similar to what we're experiencing in Clinton County as to the other 2 counties.
It is, and when you look at that, there are some districts within the county that have gained, and some districts that have lost. Likewise, in the regions that have gained and some that have lost. But your overall trend is not uncommon. It is not a district-specific set of instances that has brought you to a decline in enrollment. This is some of the, I guess, the graph, the key at the bottom didn't show up. But you are actually experiencing the top line, which is the gray line, is the PDE projection. Correct. And the point of the slide is that you are experiencing a sharper than predicted decline by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, likely because the modeling that they use assumes that there is a number of children born 6 years prior to entering school, and on average they tend to stay in the district during that point in time. It probably is you have a large number of students who are out migrating from the district from the time they are born to the time that they enter kindergarten. And some of the demographics of the county shows that you have a population that is trending up in age, and the younger younger families are moving out of the district. At least they have been in the past couple of years, as the next census holds. Again, I'm going to put this on all these slides. This is a mathematical model that is mathematically correct. What you believe is going to happen is something that we're going to really have to delve into. Once we looked at it, we started to break the district into northern and the southern tier. The elementary schools have a collective capacity currently to house 1,800 students. They have 1,419 students enrolled as of the beginning of October, which is about 79% of the capacity that they hold. Based on the 3-year and 5-year enrollment trends in this district, you are predicted to lose an additional 506 elementary students, resulting in an enrollment of 913 students by 24-25 school year, which would place your schools at about 51% of their total capacity. That becomes a very difficult model to administer efficiently because you have schools that have, in elementary schools, that may only be 1 or 2 or 3 sections deep at each grade level, and the rest of the building could have occupied 4 or 5 or 6 sections had the building been at capacity.
That statistic excludes Renovo Elementary?
That is the southern part of the school district. Renovo Elementary actually is trending to hold relatively even. It's in enrollment. As a matter of fact, in the slide, it has capacity for 351 students. It currently has 221 students enrolled. And given the projections, they're only indicating to decrease another 11 students in the next 5 school year. So the northern part of the school district, both at the elementary and secondary level, is kind of trending level to a slight decline, where the southern part of the school district, which is all of your other elementary schools, are seeing the larger losses in student body. And it just actually indicated this, that again, even though you are declining at the secondary level, our focus has been primarily at the elementary level. You only have 1 middle school and 1 elementary, one middle and 1 high school in both the northern and the southern part of the school district. So there is no consolidation that's going to occur there. There are no greater efficiencies by bringing the student body together. They are already together. So as we move forward in the study and bring this to conclusion, what you're really going to want to do in your elementary schools is look at your grade alignments and try and figure out how you can best efficiently deliver the educational program that you as a school district want to do in buildings that are obviously safe and secure, well lit, and importantly energy efficient for you to operate. So the focus again now, at least for the initial part of the study, is that critical elementary group of schools that are declining enrollment. You may want to look beyond the enrollment projections that we do as educational demographers, and that includes the people at PBE. They predict future enrollments based on what is currently happening with the enrollment of the student body now or the student body in the past 3 to 5 years. Economic and social demographers, and there are companies out there like Decision Insight, really kind of flip that projection the other way. And they, instead of looking at what happened to previous student bodies to predict what happens to future student bodies, they look at what are the changing economic conditions in the school district, what's the housing market like, what does the average family make, what does the average family spend, along with the migration of people in and out of the county and in and out of the school district. And from that, they predict student enrollment. Those things aren't a reflection of student enrollment. Student enrollment is predicted based on those things. And one of the things that I pointed out to the administration in my research is that even though your student population is currently declining, the property value in Clinton County was $124,700 in 2017, which is much smaller than the national average. But between 2016 and 2017, the median property value increased from $119,500 to the $124,700, which is a 4.35% increase. That's a pretty dramatic statistic, which again can have 2 different outcomes for you. You could have a lot of people sitting on houses who saw the value of their houses decline with the recession, and now they're back to where they were, and all of a sudden they put them on the market, and you have a lot of out-migration. Or they put those houses on the market, interest rates are low, those houses are well cared for, they have good bones to them, and you see an in-migration as a result of those houses coming onto the market. That's something that we would not be able to predict given student demographics, but a company might, like Decision Insight, be able to predict that for you. Ultimately, that has to be a decision that the district has to make, because you have to settle on planning numbers that you feel comfortable with and then we can come back with architectural and educational solutions to assist you in meeting those goals. The one thing that I will tell you, and I know I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but obviously you know that it was already mentioned that how school budgets are constrained by Act 1, state funding, increasing in the cost of benefits, school closures, and the consolidation of your current attendance units is probably something that is very likely in the district's immediate future in order to maintain, really the kind of goals financially that your superintendent is laying out for you.
So next we're going to step from that enrollment data that we've been discussing and start looking at the assessments as we start moving through the school district. And again, we've been through all your elementaries as well as your secondary buildings, both doing interior surveys, whether it's looking at every classroom in the district, your core program spaces, which are your gymnasiums, cafeterias, libraries, kitchens, also getting up into attics, things of that nature, and understanding how the buildings are put together, the bones that Fred spoke about earlier. It's important to know a building, the finishes may not look, they may look dated, but the overall structure is sound and can be more efficient, so that allows us to evaluate the cost to maintain facilities moving forward. Also looking at exterior of the building, whether it's the exterior envelope, windows, roofing, things of that nature. I would note that we've been involving the core company in those discussions that they may, there's been discussion about the potential that you may move forward with some small projects with them. So really understanding how those projects may occur, how we can be more efficient. For instance, if you do take a building that has single pane windows, the energy efficiency improvements of those, or things like roofing where you have had a schedule of replacing roofs on your buildings, but some of those are going to be coming out of warranty, and you need to start planning for them now in that sort of post-Act 1 budget that you're planning for those components. As Fred had mentioned earlier, one of the first things we did was really, and some of this is us coming up to speed and working with you, really understanding the nuances of how your district works. And just, I think, an important graphic that we all have been discussing over the last few months is, which I'm sure you're aware, is the organization of your southern sort of schools, as well as Bucktail and Renovo, and sort of understanding how those facilities interact. And what would really come, a large part of the discussion, and what we're going to focus on tonight, instead of bringing all the facilities to you at once, tonight we're going to start off talking about the southern elementary schools, because that has been a lot of focus, especially with some of the enrollment discussion that we've had. Because of that, Renovo and Bucktail at this time, we feel that they're pretty stable, as well as your middle and high school. And it's really going to be those 5 elementary schools that we talk about first. So, what we've also done, while I've been jumping forward in that district map, what you have in front of you is we've also been doing detailed surveys, not just visual and walking through the buildings, but you have the building floor prints in front of you. For safety and security, we're not putting those up on the screen, but essentially we've laid out and confirmed every use of every space in your building's currently. That's on one of the slides, and then we had a blow up of Robb Elementary as a little bit larger scale that you're able to look at. Whether it's a classroom, special education, learning support, how those buildings are being used. Also looking at the age of the building, have renovations occurred, has construction occurred over the years for those facilities, and then what's the capacity for each of your buildings currently. Next, we stepped into, and what you see up on the screen is looking at existing facilities and condition index, essentially scoring these buildings. It's a little subjective, but it's really sort of trying to mathematically evaluate your buildings. And there's a series of categories that we look at. Each building typically is about a 4 to 5 page analysis with detailed line items and cost. But these are the major categories, looking at the site, exterior envelope of the building, interior elements, what are the finishes of the floor, what's the structure of the facility, what's the safety and security, in the case of an event, what happened, as well as looking at the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems in the building. And then we rate those, essentially each category 1 to 5, and that's over about 65 categories that we're looking at. And 5 is a brand new facility, 4 is good, and then you go the whole way down to essentially critical, and a building needs to be replaced immediately. So, this is the matrix then that we apply that against, and you can see the color coding essentially across that. As an example, we took in the middle there the walls of Dickey Elementary School. They appear to be 3, which is sort of fair condition. And then we've got a small matrix, sort of a summary discussion of that specific topic. And then ultimately that builds to a low and a high cost range that we summarize for that. There's also always a matrix at the top showing that scale of new to critical condition. And those color codings also tied to years, things that should be dealt with immediately, the whole way up to 8 or 10 years out. That then, as you move through the 4 or 5 page report for each building, that eventually totals at the bottom and creates an overall facilities condition index score for that building. We're going to zoom in on that sort of that bottom for Dickey Elementary School. Again, I've got that sort of matrix scale at the top, and what we're showing is color coding for Dickey Elementary. And the reason we're showing Dickey tonight is, frankly, it's Dickey and Liberty Kirk are the 2 buildings that have most age in your school district that there hasn't been a major renovation project. Dickey Elementary is in that 55, 60-year age. Really, there's been very minimal projects done over the years. Liberty Kirk is in a similar situation, where many of your other elementary schools and your secondary buildings have been recently renovated. So you can see, really, we're saying there are systems in that building right now that roughly $4 to $4.4 million into the elementary school that need to be addressed in the near future. Can some of these things be put off? Most definitely, but they're really at a critical stage that your staff is having to really spend a substantial amount of time maintaining systems that are substantially beyond their life expectancy.
Okay, hold on.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at this here, and it's saying that total potential project cost is $10 million.
Yes, and that's why we're gonna sort of talk about options with Dickey Elementary School. Our concern is there has not been a project at Dickey for essentially 50 plus years, and a large part of that cost for Dickey Elementary School is your accessibility to the building. There's $2 million that we're tying to Dickey Elementary School, specifically because Dickey Elementary School has about 4 different levels in the building.
Okay.
And in order to make that building accessible, you would essentially have to add 3 elevators to that building, but also tear out the stairs that were in that building to make those 3 elevators work. A sub option would be to add 4 elevators. For a building that's 45,000 square feet that only serves 12 classrooms, what we're really going to be coming full circle to tell you is we do not believe it's feasible or financially recommended to renovate Dickey Elementary School. That you would be in a better situation because some of these enrollment drops that have already occurred and may continue to proceed, that you would be better served to close Dickey Elementary School and do an addition to another building. So here's an order of magnitude. Dickey Elementary School has 12 core classrooms to that building. To renovate all of Dickey Elementary School could be $8 to $10 million. If you would add 12 classrooms.
Okay, but you don't have to do that all at once.
Oh, most definitely.
Okay,
Yes.
so you can do little bits at one time, correct?
You could, but there's
Now, okay, now I understand that what I'm hearing you say is that Dickey is not ADA compliant, is that correct?
Most definitely, yes.
Okay, so there are ways of going and fixing that, isn't there?
There are ways you could phase in components of Dickey Elementary School, but the elevators and the accessibility is something that's very difficult to get around. The problem is you come in the main entrance of Dickey,
Right.
and you essentially have to go upstairs in both directions. And then when you get to the end of the hallway,
Okay,
you have
so
to
whenever
go
you
down.
first come in the front steps, there's actually a hallway that goes to the right, that can actually go down in, that actually goes down into the auditorium, that comes around, that goes to that next level, correct?
Yes, but that is
Okay,
not.
so that, by doing that, is that not,
But then as you go
Access.
across that hallway, then you go up to another set of, you have to run into another set of stairs before you get into the classroom wings. And then as you get to the end of the hallway, you have to drop, you have another set of steps before you get to the kindergarten classrooms. And then what makes it worse is when you get to those kindergarten classrooms, you have to go down a staircase into each kindergarten level. And that's what's the difficulty. It's not just a matter of adding one elevator to that building, it's really the problem of adding multiple elevators to that
okay,
building.
I'm not an expert in this.
Okay.
What about stairlifts?
By the new building code that has been passed, unfortunately, well, you have two things that are occurring. Unfortunately, the hallway widths and the stair widths in that building are very narrow. So putting a lift in isn't really feasible. Essentially, you choke down the required egress width in those hallways. The second thing, unfortunately, that happened is last October, the new building code was implemented for the state. Chairlifts are no longer allowed to be utilized in hallways. You can only use chairlifts in certain situations, like a stage, as an example. Essentially, nationally, the building code is becoming tougher on accessibility. Just an unfortunate thing that you're staring at with the elementary school. So, where many of your other buildings that you have throughout the district do not have these multiple levels that's occurring in that building. So is it something that you have to deal with tomorrow? No, but it's something that imminently you need to be planning for and how to deal with the accessibility of that building. Okay? Unfortunately, not all this news is going to be good, but we're trying to set up some areas how we can be more efficient. What we are looking at, some of the discussion that, again, I mentioned 12 classrooms. If you were to add 12 classrooms to another elementary school, even forgetting the population changes that have been occurring, adding 12 classrooms to another facility, you're talking about $3 to $4 million versus $8 to $10 million. And the reason some of these costs, unfortunately, are this high is those elevator situations that we're running into. So there are efficiencies that we're going to be looking at options for you. One of the directions to proceed in the future. Okay. Actually, I'm going to stay on that slide for a second, and this sort of highlights, sir, your comment. What we start to worry about is when we see a cost per square foot for a building running $148 to $174 a square foot. New construction is typically for school construction is running $180 to $200 a square foot in the state right now. So that's our concern with Dickey Elementary School, is to renovate that building right now is essentially approaching new construction. So is it the most efficient dollars for you long term to be maintaining that building? Can you do it? Yes, but it becomes very costly. And part of the reason I mentioned it could be much less costly adding addition in another building is not only are we having to renovate those classrooms, but all the core support spaces, the mechanical rooms, your sort of your gyms, things of that nature, your administration, where if you're tying into another elementary, you're really just adding classrooms. So you get an efficiency that you can reduce square footage. Okay, so next, what we wanted to show you is, and these numbers are still in development because we are looking at a lot. Obviously, we've got quite a number of facilities throughout your district, but we're first focusing on those southern elementary schools, okay? And what we're doing is we're rating the FCI scores for each of the schools. And if you remember again, critical is you need to deal with it right now. When you get up to 4 or 5, it's things that you need to be aware of 6 to 10 years from now. And some of that might even be the building's in great condition, you just want to reevaluate it 6 to 8 years. What you're running into is Dickey Elementary School has a score of 40, Liberty Curtis slightly higher at 44. Again, both of those buildings have quite a number of years on them since they've been renovated. Then you get into your Mill Hall, Robb, and Woodward, and the scores are higher. That's because you have done renovations at those buildings in the last 10 to 15 years. Mill Hall and Woodward actually more recently, so you've got a score of 74 to 71. Robb Elementary is actually coming to the end of about 20 years ago, you did some very substantial work at Robb. So we're warning you that Robb is starting to come up as well of having some needs to occur at those buildings. So color coding is a little hard to see on the screen, but Dickey falls in that sort of poor. It's actually just crossing over the 40% mark into worn and really at the end of its life cycle. Liberty Curtis slightly fair, where your other 3 buildings are sort of in the good to fair condition. And I would note, Dickey, being at a 40, it would be lower, but your staff has, for a building that has not been renovated for 50 plus years, it's in very good condition. The systems, the bones in that building have been maintained, but you can only go so long before you have single pane windows that are not thermally efficient. They're not double glazed like we all have in our homes nowadays. So we're also starting to itemize those low and high cost ratings for each of the buildings. Not that you would do a renovation in each of these buildings. And as an example, Woodward, I'll just pick on that at the bottom of 1.2 to 1.6. We're not saying that you need in the near future to do that, but over the next 10 years, you need to plan that there will be itemized renovations to Woodward Elementary, things that will have to be renovated. Where some of the buildings, when you get to, as an example, into Robb or into Dickey, as we spoke of, that you need to be budgeting over the next 10 years, there are going to be some substantial things that you need to deal with and be aware for that. Okay? So, building upon that, and some of this is what you could be staring at, what you need to be planning for over long term. I think this ties in a little bit of the superintendent's discussion of the problem is before Act 1, you had a lot of districts that they really wouldn't think a lot about their facilities, and then when they decided to renovate it, they would just raise the taxes. That's not what happens in today's environment. In today's environment, you need to be planning out if you want to renovate or maintain your facilities, you need to be planning on that 5-year, 10-year time period. Okay? So we started to look at a series of options. And we've had a lot of discussions on the enrollment data that we showed you this evening. And some of those discussions are, well, that decline may continue, and you need to be aware of it because it has already occurred for the last 5 years. It could start to level off over the next few years. Some of that data you'll see this coming fall as your new enrollments come in place. So we've had a lot of discussion of having a series of options that start to make your buildings more efficient, but then could also increase the efficiency over time. So as an example, possibly closing one school in the near future, and then possibly your enrollment levels off at that point and you're in good shape. Or having the trigger the ability that you could then have a second closure or consolidation to make your district more efficient, say 3 years or 5 years in the future. And that's some of the options that you're going to see up on the screen. So option 1, the first thing that we've been discussing is potentially closing Dickey Elementary School. It appears that the majority of those students can actually be absorbed throughout your other buildings in the southern part of the district. It will require a small addition. Where we've been preliminary looking at is you have a lot of land behind Mill Hall. It makes sense that could be somewhere that an efficient addition could be added at a minimal cost. And then we've also had discussion at Liberty that potentially, because of the age of that facility, you might either renovate it or you might build a new Liberty curtain in the future. So that was sort of one discussion that we've had. Option 2 is that you would do option 1, except that Liberty curtain may close. That would be one option that you could look at. And I'm going to say, as we move through all these 5 options, what we're trying to do is create a large range here. And this was discussed at the facilities last week. We're not saying to do one option or the other. What we're trying to do is show some large extremes from option 1 the whole way to option 5. And for you to decide as a district and a board of directors which direction you want to go. So as we start to move through these different options, option 2 could be closing Liberty Curtain and centralizing more at Mill Hall. Option 3 might be you close Dickey, and then if you need to, in a number of years, you close Robb, and what that would create is a situation where you would have a centralized elementary school at Mill Hall, you would have a satellite at Liberty Curtain, a satellite at Woodward, and a satellite at Renovo. So that idea of you have sort of a large elementary at the center, and then outlying elementary schools so that you don't have a lot of travel for your students. That was one discussion that we had. Option 4 was we looked at what if you close, and this, I don't know that this option is really something that you should consider, but we said, what if you close all the elementary schools in the southern part of the district and built one large elementary school? What would be the cost efficiency for that? That's something that we'll investigate. I think the important thing for that option is not that you would, and maybe you tell us otherwise, the importance of that option is you have to be out providing this information to your constituents. And somebody might say, well, why did you close 1, or why are you planning on closing 2? Why not close all of them? You can say, yes, we did look at that information. This is the reason we decided to go that direction or not go that direction. Option 5 is something that we've been also having a lot of discussion. We've been focused initially on the elementary schools in the southern part of the district, but one of the discussions we've had is you do have a lot of availability or room in your high school, Central Mountain. And so if we would move a grade from the middle school up to the high school, and we would move a grade from the elementaries into the middle school, essentially that would be another direction that you can become very efficient in the district for your capacity. So these 5 options may develop over the next month or 2 months. I would assume that they would. We will be putting hard dollar numbers to them so that you can start to sort of plan out over the long term. But this is initially the range that we're trying to create. And I think this was something that we said at our facilities meeting last week was not that you're going to do one option or the other. Don't assume that we are definitely going to do option 3 or option 5. What we're trying to do is create a wide range of projects so that you see sort of a full breadth of what could be done to make your district more efficient. So with that, we tried to keep this, I know that was a lot of information to absorb if you're hearing this for the first time. I wanted to open it up to questions, thoughts, and then things that we can take back and implement further in the study for you.
I'm intrigued by that idea of potentially, I mean, we have no idea where this is going to go right now, but I just I had an opportunity to think more about this, moving another grade to the high school, so then, I never really thought about this before, then they'd have access to all of the other amenities here that the middle school kids, that right now, I don't know if they use them, do they? The CTC, all the extra, the automobile, all that, do the middle school kids
Middle
use
school
them?
students are not eligible for CTC programs as far as within the programming, but that doesn't mean that we could look at using that space for different type of elective areas. They wouldn't be part of an actual career and technical education program.
Okay, they could have experiences, but they wouldn't count for credits. Is that
But I thought we were actually looking at trying to grow that CTC program. So by bringing those kids up here and putting them in that space, you're just defeating our whole process, trying to increase that CTC program.
Oh, no, I'm just saying to allow kids that have interest in those extracurricular activities, then.
They can't do it yet.
I think I understand what your perspective is we don't have an auto tech shop at the middle school. We don't have.
Right, that's what I mean, right.
So what you're saying is, if the facility was available, if the classroom space was available, is it possible for students to have at a younger age start to experience programs such as that, not necessarily an approved CTC program,
Right.
but access to the space? Would that help clarify what you're?
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. If the kids were here, then
That would be highly unusual.
Okay.
However, you know.
Have you ever seen that in your experience with that? Like an 8th grade would come, be at the high school? I mean, is that what you're talking about?
You have those opportunities. It would not be, you're correct, it would not by the state be a CTC program, but you do have the availability that you could have the activities, things of those opportunities.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me reword
No,
that.
I'm sorry if I was misunderstanding.
If that's what you mean, realignment at the high school, is that what you mean, bring another grade here? Is that what
Yes.
That's what, okay.
Yes, we have done
That's-
that throughout the state before.
And how's your success rate with that? Any feedback or?
I think it's, and again, that's why we're not saying that any of this is a go or a no-go tonight. Part of this is we're trying to develop what works for Keystone,
Right.
for you as a community. We have had communities where we've had 6-12 buildings, and they work very efficiently. And then we've had facilities that are 9-12, or I'm sorry, 10-12 buildings. So what's works for you, and how are you most efficient with the facilities that you have.
I think it's part too of the educational program that you envision. If you have the classroom space to bring additional students in the building, you can create still a middle school space within the larger building, but you might begin a mentoring program of kids in the vocational technical school with the younger kids, because often, at least in the area that we are in central Pennsylvania, we're trying to get kids into the vocational program and get away from the idea that everybody needs to go to college, because the real money right now is in the trades, not in the college education in art history. So again, if you have to envision a program where you're using your spaces for an elementary school and mentoring program, then you can do that without mixing the two programs. If you don't want to do that, then you don't have to do that, but that space may sit vacant. So again, I think that educational part of what you're trying to do is a critical wraparound to this space that's becoming available for you to do it, and the need to deliver that program efficiently.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just also want to say that I think Fred alluded to this on the one slide where he said we're unique and diverse in so many ways. 500 school districts across the Commonwealth. There's so many different grade configurations based on buildings and people who have been experiencing this. The main purpose for you to have this information, again, is to put some thoughtful planning into how you're going to put your finances towards the needs, not just immediately, but also thinking forward so that you're not spending unnecessarily funds to do something you don't need 2-3 years from now. But additionally, knowing that where your need is and what is your educational vision, what is our vision for the students in this district? And how do we plan thoughtfully so that the facility does not inhibit the instructional programming that you want to provide or that we want to provide? I've seen so many districts try to retrofit programs into facilities, and it's really hindering. So you can make anything work. I'm so sure you've seen a lot of different configurations across the Commonwealth. But again, I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is just a point of information. This board is not making any decisions about closures, and closing and realigning students does not only depend on dollars. There is an impact to students and community members and parents when school districts have to look at these decisions. So I just want to make sure that we know we're looking at information, we are not making any decisions, and there's a whole lot of information other than dollars and cents that have to play into these conversations.
Well, the big thing that I'm looking at and I'm seeing is no matter what we do here, you're looking at either closing Dickey, or no, you are looking at closing Dickey, and it looks like you're pushing to close Liberty Curtain also.
I don't think anybody's pushing any agenda right now, Roger. I just want to be clear with that.
I'm just looking at
These
the
yeah,
options.
and here's why. The facilities committee met to look at the data, and based on the experience of some gentlemen who aren't emotionally attached to the data, to say, with your experience, and I think you heard their credentials, what do you see as potential options? And the facilities committee then gave some direction.
And I think actually we took the opposite approach. We were sitting down discussing, and we're presenting all this information to you the first time tonight, and you're hearing these options, and they assume that we're going that direction. Actually, jokingly, I think me and Fred might disagree about the enrollment a little bit, okay? So one of the things that we said at the table was, and some of that's a little bit looking into crystal ball, but what I think is strongly coming out of that is you have had population drop. Department of Education is saying that that will continue, and it looks like our data as well. However, I took the more pessimistic approach. I said, well, what happens if it levels off next year? Okay, and that's actually a little bit of why you have sort of the option configuration here. A lot of the discussion that we've had sitting at the table is, okay, you had a lot of population drop already, and you've got some accessibility issues that you need to deal with at Dickey. And correct, we're not from the community. There may be some ties to Dickey Elementary School, and you need to discuss that with yourself. For us, that seems to be something that you need to deal with in the very near future, unfortunately. Okay?
Well,
however,
what I'm looking at is
Yes.
the fact that I'm kind of agreeing with you. I'm actually looking for an influx of people to this district. Because now that we've got a great superintendent, although I'm not real happy right now, but anyway, all right, I mean, I think we got a great superintendent right now that's doing wonderful things throughout the district. And we are actually drawing in people, okay, because of what she's doing. So, with that being said, I'm thinking, okay, this whole thing about population going down, now I'm kind of looking at we're going to be drawing people in because of the district. That's what I'm looking at.
And I, from the other side, and again, I'm not pessimistic or optimistic. I'm really kind of basing it on the numbers to try and be impartial. You've lost 650 some odd students. You're mathematically predicted to lose another 800. Even if you lost only 400 and the numeric calculation for whatever societal economic reasons were 50% wrong, you still end up losing 1,000 students in a decade. At one point in time, I had 5 drivers and 6 vehicles in my driveway. Now it's my wife and I. Over time, we had to decide which of those vehicles and how we're going to keep and use them. And I know that's kind of simple, but you're kind of, as a district, you're in that situation where you want everybody to have and be able to do the best things that you can do, but you probably can't keep 6 cars in your driveway when you only have 2 drivers in the household. And you've got to decide, is it 2, is it 3, is it 4 cars? And again, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's probably not 6 cars, no matter what the optimist says.
So I think with those options, we're saying in the very near future, you need to deal probably with Dickey, or we need to have some other discussion or approach to that. But then you probably need to also have incrementally something that you're planning for 3 years or 5 years from now. That if the population would continue, if you take step 1, if you have a modest population drop, and then you need to plan for the next phase, and if the population would continue to decline colonies, then you would go into option 2 or 3 or 4 or something in that configuration. But then you have this plan in place so that you aren't 3 years from now and your population has continued to decline, and you don't have a plan in place to resolve that.
When we look at this FCI, and I've been pushing the FCI since I came to the district. The facilities condition index is something that's used throughout the Commonwealth. It's not something that's new. The Commonwealth agencies, PennDOT, Turnpike, some of those, Department of Public Welfare, a whole bunch of these other ones, they're using this. DCNR has signed on to do that. They're picking up this facilities condition index, because one of the things that he touched on is, even if we would keep all the elementary schools open, we're expected to spend in the next 1 to 10 years, we should be spending anywhere from, you can look at the numbers, they're up to $1 to $8 million in most of these buildings. So we know we need to put some of that money in there. So when we're looking at projects going forward, does it make sense to spend $8 million at 50 elementary school, or are we better to spend $3 million and do the same thing at a different school? Or is it better to take the whole building down and bring it back up, because our cost per square foot is this, $150 to $200 already in renovation costs. So the FCI is an important factor that when you guys are looking at this data and trying to digest it, I look at that and I really believe in that data, because it really starts to speak to how we should start moving some of this stuff forward, because it may not make sense, even though we want to keep that Dickey Elementary open. We know we need to spend X amount of dollars to bring it up to today's standard. Maybe not to what 21st century learning is, but to today's standard.
Fair.
So maybe we want to look getting rid of it and raising a new building there. Those are options, and what those costs look like. So that's why we developed some of these scenarios. We developed it with not only the other administrators, but also with the facilities committee in Crabtree, before trying to come up with some options to us. So I would hope that you guys dive into the FCI piece a little harder, and really kind of try to understand that, because I'm a believer in that, and I can push that, and I wanted to have some of that stuff in place. An important thing too, I think Jeff kind of touched on in front of this, is we're aligning ourselves pretty good. We heard the last board meeting that why did I not do this study? I asked these people to do the study so that we can align ourselves, so that if we do decide to do something going forward, we can go after some plan-com money and all that. If I get the study internally, we wouldn't have been able to do that. That's why we utilize these gentlemen and Alyssa that's sitting in the back room before us to try and get some of this stuff together. So if we decide to change something or do something, we're ready to go after some of this plan-com money. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Touching on Rob's comment, what he's speaking of is, if you move forward with a plan-con project, we're required to have a registered architect as part of the project. They have to be part of each of the reviews with the state, who's also tied to education facilities planning. Like myself, I'm a registered educational facilities planner. I know some of this information is not going here. Again, I don't think this is any decisions to be made now. Any additional comments, or if you want to provide that information to administration? I know we are typically meeting about every 2 weeks, and developing this further. And I would assume, I wouldn't even assume, as we come forward, this information will be enriched and be a little bit, and will vary as we move forward through this.
One question, I know that
Yes, sir.
you did concentrate mostly on the elementary schools, but how with the secondary schools, not Bucktail, but middle school and the high school here, do we have the FCIs on those as well, and facility condition index, and I don't remember seeing that there.
No, it's not in there yet. The FCIs take quite a long time to pull together, and actually both our office as well as the engineers. In the past few weeks, we have completed 5 elementaries that we presented to you today.
Okay.
What we had on the schedule at the beginning was by February we would have the FCIs complete on all of the buildings in the district.
Okay.
So it basically involves boots on the ground survey, which is complete for all the buildings. We're now doing the rating scores, then we do the summary reports for each line item, and then we finally address the cost. So,
Any clue how this building stands up for wind loading?
As we hear it right now, so.
The roof's not gonna blow off on us while we're sitting here?
We will be evaluating that for you, so.
Does anybody from the facilities committee, have anything else to add or questions, information?
No, I was extremely impressed with the presentation, facilities meeting, the input, the questions. I feel highly confident in your abilities. I want to thank you.
I was really pleased with all the information that you got us at this early point, and I think it's going to be very valuable and look at these options and try to make some educated decisions. It's pretty hard, like you said, crystal ball, but a lot of this is what is doing when you look at that. But I think we have some good starting points here to study this information. You guys have done a great job so far as projecting the enrollments and so on, which is going to be very helpful. So look forward to getting some even more solid numbers here soon.
And I would note in that final study that does come forward, you already have full detail of the NCI reports, as Mr. Selma commented earlier.
Great, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Okay, we're gonna move on.